Welcome back, you night owls. Tonight we step into a dimly lit Victorian bedroom where the shadows stretch long, the candles flicker, and somewhere in the distance the faint tick of a mantel clock reminds us that even in elegance time presses on. A woman in a lace-trimmed nightdress sits at her vanity, brushing her hair with slow, deliberate strokes. The mirror reflects not only her face but the expectations of a society that believes her hair says everything about her, her wealth, her virtue, her station, and her secrets. And secrets she has plenty. Tonight we're peeling back the well-combed layers of Victorian womanhood, not with scissors, but with stories. We're delving into the twisted, braided and pinned world of hair as high art, quiet rebellion, deep mourning, and more than a little madness. Just a cheeky warning. These stories of tight corsets, and even tighter updos, they probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And go ahead, post your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where and when you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The story opens not in a palace or a London ballroom, but in a modest townhouse on a narrow street, where gas lamps hiss and the clatter of carriage wheels never quite stops. Here, a lady of means, though not of title, sits upright in her boudoir. Her name isn't important just yet, but her morning task is the daily preparation of her hair. She doesn't do it alone, of course. A lady's maid hovers behind her, fingers deft and expression unreadable. Together they begin a routine that lasts nearly an hour, brushing, sectioning, oiling, pinning. To us, it might feel like a small ritual. To her, it's armour. The Victorian period spans over 6 decades, beginning in 1837 and ending in 1901, and during that time hairstyles morph with every whisper of social change. But even in their earliest form, they are more than just fashion statements. They are visual declarations. In a time when women are discouraged from speaking their minds in public, their hair speaks volumes. In the 1840s, the style is soft and demure. Think centre part, slicked sides, low buns. Hair lies close to the head, suggesting control, modesty and domesticity. The kind of hair that says, I embroider in silence and never dream of voting. It's all an illusion, of course. Many of these women are far more rebellious than their hairstyles led on. The irony is, despite the supposed simplicity, achieving that look is anything but easy. The oil used to tame flyaways smells faintly of lavender and something more animalistic. That's because it often includes bear grease. Yes, actual bear fat. Supposedly brilliant for shine, slightly less brilliant for attracting suitors who aren't partial to odour wilderness. And then there's the pins, hundreds of them. They tuck, twist and anchor even the simplest coil. The average Victorian woman owns dozens of hairpins, often of bone or steel, and at least one has poked an unsuspecting suitor during a stolen embrace. A minor occupational hazard of romance. Not every woman achieves the ideal style with her own hair. In fact, many don't even try. Enter switches, lengths of human hair purchased and added in for volume or complexity. These switches are sometimes bought at apothecaries or through the hairdresser herself. And the source? Well, let's just say historians still argue whether all of it was voluntarily given. By mid-century, styles become more architectural. Buns stack higher, braids become more elaborate, and curls frame the face like delicate ivy. Our nameless lady gazes into the mirror, approving the silhouette her hairstyle casts in the soft light. She looks taller, more formidable. It's no coincidence. This is an era that begins to ask, even if in whispers, whether women might play larger roles in society. But there's a darker thread woven into this golden braid. Fashion doesn't wait for grief to pass. Even in mourning, women are expected to look presentable, and hair, being both personal and public, adapts accordingly. Just a few blocks away, in another townhouse cloaked in heavy black crepe, a woman mourns the death of her husband. Her dress is jet black, her veil thick. Her hairstyle, severely parted with minimal decoration, perhaps a dull hairnet or comb. But here's where things get strange. Tucked in a brooch at her throat, or coiled inside a locket, is a lock of the deceased's hair, woven into intricate patterns, sometimes embroidered into fabric. Mourning hair jewellery becomes a secret industry all its own, and it isn't just for grief. Hair art flourishes across the century, with entire wreaths crafted from the collected strands of family members, displayed like dusty family trees on the drawing room wall. Hair isn't waste, it's memory, a material of deep sentiment, and occasionally a tool of emotional manipulation. Speaking of manipulation, the era's fashion magazines begin to feature increasingly complex updos, complete with diagrams. Godey's Ladies' Book becomes the Pinterest of the 1850s, and oh, the societal pressure that follows. Suddenly it isn't enough to be neat, you must be fashionable, distinct, impressive, but not too impressive. Heaven forbid your hair draw more attention than your husband's achievements. The morning routine extends. Some women hire their own hairdressers, or in more rural areas, rely on travelling stylists who come bearing heated curling tongs and news from the city. In elite circles, hairstyles are discussed as seriously as politics. Still, the working-class woman, scrubbing chamber pots or folding linens, has her own quiet relationship with hair. Her style must be practical, easily maintained, and above all restrained. But even here, small rebellions shine through. A coloured ribbon, a stubborn curl, a refusal to crop her hair for convenience's sake. She cannot afford a switch, but she keeps every fallen strand in a small pouch, dreaming of the day she might trade it for something beautiful. By the 1860s, the silhouette of the head changes again. Hair rises in volume and moves backward. Think rolls, puffed crowns, ringlets tumbling down shoulders. And once again, illusion takes the stage. A good portion of this volume, false. Either added switches or, in some cases, rats. Stuffed forms made from discarded hair, used to bulk up a bun. Yes, that's right. She stores her own fallen strands, then uses them to pad her hairstyle like a secret scaffolding. And yet, despite all this effort, she's still at risk of ridicule. Satirical papers love to poke fun at women's fashion, with cartoons of hairdos so large they trap birds or knock paintings off the wall. One particularly snarky sketch shows a woman's hairstyle housing a family of mice. Harsh, but not far from reality, considering the hygiene situation of the time. Hair, especially elaborate styles that stay pinned for days, can become homey. As gaslights flicker and carriages clatter into dusk, Our Lady finally stands. Her hair is complete, every pin precisely placed, every strand oiled and set. She resembles a sculpture more than a person, and in many ways, that's the goal. But beneath the elegant shell is a woman navigating expectations that shift with every year, every publication, every glance from the street. She adjusts her lace collar, lifts her chin, and steps into the hallway. It's just another day in Victorian society. Another day of silent declarations made from twisted locks and strategic ringlets. Another day when beauty isn't effortless. It's engineered. And outside, the world watches, and judges, and imitates. She descends the staircase slowly, not because her feet hesitate, but because her hair demands it. With every deliberate step, the weight of her coiffure sways in perfect time with her movement, balanced by nothing but dozens of pins and a sense of societal obligation. Outside, the world hums with coal smoke and chatter, but within her own house, and within her hair, are the coded messages of Victorian life. A woman's hairstyle, though silent, shouts her intentions to the world. It is her public-facing statement, a gentle nod to tradition, a wink at progress, or a full-blown exclamation of defiance. While her corset shapes her silhouette, it is her hair that shapes perception. To understand Victorian hair fully, we must leave the townhouse and travel down the social ladder to the ballrooms, the parlours, the parks, and even the pages of gossip columns. In the upper echelons, where ladies in ivory gloves glide through marble corridors, hair functions like a kind of heraldry. The higher and more elaborate the style, the greater the likelihood that the woman behind it belongs to a family with name recognition, estate holdings, or, at the very least, a decent portrait hanging in the drawing room. Even the shape of the hair communicates. In the 1850s, a rounded bun placed low on the nape signals humility and good upbringing. A puffier crown implies a degree of fashion daring, sometimes bordering on impropriety if exaggerated. A row of curls artfully pinned to cascade over the ear, romantic and feminine. But, watch out. A style that reveals too much of the neck or lifts too high off the head risks accusations of vanity, or worse, theatricality, and nobody wants to be mistaken for an actress. Not in this decade, anyway. Society women study these styles with the diligence of botanists. They analyse the height, texture, placement of each part and curl. One misplaced braid might lead to whispers, one overly modern accessory, a peacock feather perhaps, might signal political leanings. Yes, even that. A woman might not be allowed to vote, but her bun just might be a ballot. A key moment in the 1860s finds women embracing more volume. The chignon rises in popularity, styled large at the back of the head and supported with wires or hidden pads. Godey's Ladies' Book publishes illustrations showing hairstyles so broad they threaten to eclipse the shoulders. At evening gatherings, women begin to compete, subtly of course, with towering styles supported by pins, pads and, yes, even the mysterious rat. No one dares call it a competition aloud, but you can see it in the flicker of the eyes, the way a woman glances sideways during a curtsy. Yet even in grandeur, messages lurk. A tight knot with no adornment, possibly mourning, a braid woven into a bun paired with jet combs, likely a widow past her first year of grief, a fresh floral clip nestled at the temple, unmarried, likely looking and absolutely open to receiving dance cards. Hairstyles are not just for expression, they're a social tool, a semaphore system perched right atop the head. And let's not forget the suitors. Young men, whether landowning gentry or hopeful clerks, interpret hairstyles like tea leaves. A parted fringe, youthful and open-hearted, a single curl draped across the collarbone, deliberate flirtation, or so the more romantic-minded believe. Of course, such gestures might also be accidental, or, more amusingly, the result of a pin working loose, and nobody noticing until the evening is done. Yet some women deliberately manipulate their styles for effect. They know precisely how to walk through a room with a twist falling just so, and how to tilt their head so a ribbon catches the candlelight. These are not accidents. These are strategies. A fan in one hand, an updo pinned with practised imperfection. But it isn't always courtship on the mind. In political salons and literary gatherings, women begin to use their hair to push boundaries. There is growing interest in less conventional styling, looser coils, avant-garde placements, even the occasional masculine influence. A high twist mimicking a French military knot. A comb once worn by a revolutionary aunt. It may be subtle, but the signals are there, and people notice. Oh, they always notice. At the same time, more conservative voices grow louder. They insist that proper women should maintain a style that reflects their place. Quiet, composed, modest. One columnist in an 1870s women's journal warns against the unnatural height of recent hair arrangements, which distort God's intended silhouette of the female head. Strong words, especially coming from a publication that routinely prints advertisements for hair pads and false braids. Meanwhile, young debutantes practice for the day they'll enter society. Long before their official debut, girls learn how to part their hair just so, how to manage their maiden curls, and how to sit still for the hour it takes to pin everything into place. It's not just about beauty, it's about posture, patience, and compliance. A woman who fidgets is not ready. A woman who winces at hot tongs is not resilient. But here's the irony. These girls are often the most rebellious in spirit. They hide penny novels in their hairdressing manuals, sneak perfume into their pomade jars, and exchange pins engraved with each other's initials. One girl even hides a note from her French tutor inside the hollow of a hair switch. Scandalous and resourceful. Historians still argue whether Victorian women genuinely embraced these hair rituals, or merely endured them out of necessity. But perhaps both are true. There's something undeniably empowering about mastering a difficult style, about transforming a head of hair into a work of art that turns heads, quite literally. Of course, not everyone has the same access to the tools of transformation. Hairbrushes with boar bristles, handmade tortoiseshell combs, imported pomades, perfumes, all luxuries. Middle-class women stretch what they can. They blend oils at home, trade pins with friends, and study magazine illustrations like sacred texts. Poorer women? They rely on what they have, fingers, ribbons, and patience. And still, even in tenement halls and factory corridors, hair communicates pride and resilience. In some cases, hair even becomes a source of income. Women of all classes, but especially the poor, sell their hair to dealers who travel the streets. Long, untouched locks, called virgin hair, fetch the highest prices. The hair is then cleaned, sorted and fashioned into switches, buns and fringes for wealthier clients. Some dealers travel with scales and scissors, cutting hair on the spot. It's a strange transaction, part sacrifice, part survival. The buyers rarely ask where their new tresses came from. In drawing rooms across the country, women wear these additions without question, their heads quietly hosting the strands of a girl they'll never meet. It's a kind of invisible intimacy, and occasionally a moral quandary. Some religious publications caution against vanity and false adornment, likening hair switches to deceit. One particularly stern tract warns that hair not your own may carry the soul of another. Hair possession may be a stretch. Still, the unease lingers. Even Queen Victoria, trendsetter though she may be, complicates things. Her early years are marked by simple, controlled styles, centre-parted and parted from vanity entirely. But after Albert's death, her hair becomes a physical extension of mourning, tucked, veiled and subdued. Yet she remains influential. Women across the empire imitate her restraint, her modesty, her loyalty expressed in every twist and pin. But not everyone follows. Empress Eugenie of France flaunts her curls and ornaments, provoking admiration and imitation among Britain's more daring elite. The transnational hair wars begin. One week, it's French waves. The next, an English twist returns. The fashion pendulum swings, powered by gossip and illustrated engravings. And through it all, hair remains a quiet form of currency. A woman with impeccable hair might receive an invitation to a duchess's tea. She might be painted by a society artist. She might be noticed by a gentleman with a large inheritance and a fondness for chestnut curls. Or she might simply feel like herself, worthy, powerful, composed, which is perhaps the most dangerous feeling of all. So much effort poured into keratin and oil says more about the woman than she dares to say herself. In every combed strand and careful twist there is pride, performance, and sometimes, just sometimes, a whisper of rebellion tucked quietly beneath the final pin. The day advances, and so does the rhythm of the household. Footmen open parlour shutters, carriages clatter past window panes. But in the bedchambers of Victorian women, time slows. Hair, after all, is not a hurried affair. It requires preparation, strategy, and an almost military level of coordination. Our protagonist, now comfortably seated at her vanity once more, is midway through her morning routine. It's a ritual, one shared by countless women across the empire, and despite the oil lamps and whalebone corsets, it's remarkably familiar to modern eyes. The tilt of the mirror, the furrowed brow while taming a stubborn curl, the quiet tension as tools are retrieved in sequence. She begins with brushing. Not idly, but deliberately. 100 strokes as custom dictates. Her maid's arms are strong, practised. The brush itself, made of boar bristle and ivory, glides from crown to ends, gathering loose strands and distributing the oils evenly. The scent of lavender water and warm beeswax fills the room. On particularly dry days, a few drops of castor oil are applied to the tips to maintain gloss. The hair must shimmer, not shine too brightly, of course, that would be vulgar, but enough to suggest health, cleanliness, and the proper inner constitution of a lady. Pomade comes next, delicately warmed over a small candle burner. It's thick, sweet-smelling, and unforgiving. One wrong dab and the hair becomes slick and ropey, but the maid knows what she's doing. She warms it just enough to melt, smoothing it onto the roots before beginning the partition. The part is essential, dead centre, always. A lopsided part is considered lazy, or worse, coquettish. And a woman with a crooked part may as well be walking round in her petticoat. In Victorian logic, symmetry equals moral soundness. The neat part says, I'm orderly. It says, I observe tradition. It says, I did not read Shelley under the bed covers last night, thank you very much. Once parted, the real work begins. Hair is sectioned, pinned, coiled, and shaped with methodical patience. Small metal curling irons, heated on the stove or over a flame, are applied to the ends of select strands, not too long lest they singe. This process, known as calendaring, adds just enough wave to suggest femininity without extravagance. Here lies a delicate balance. Be graceful, but not vain. Adorned, but not artificial. Fashionable, but never ahead of it. It's like trying to dance on a teacup. If she's feeling bold today, she might request a braided coil across the back of her head. woven through a ribbon matching her gown. If she's in mourning, the ribbon is black. If in half mourning, perhaps grey or mauve. There are rules, always rules, and everyone is watching. Meanwhile, the hairpins pile up. Long ones, short ones, curved ones, crimped. They're stored in a velvet-lined box arranged like surgical tools. Each has a purpose. Some hold structure. Others conceal seams. A few are purely ornamental. Tiny tortoiseshell florets or dull jet beads for sombre occasions. The maid works in silence, her own hair pulled tightly into a low knot. Functional, clean, invisible. She was trained to be invisible, but every once in a while her eye twitches as she inserts another pin, silently calculating how long this style will hold. Will it survive the carriage ride to tea? Will it last through dinner, where the heat of conversation and proximity to the fireplace threatens to undo the delicate curls? She finishes with a mist of rose water and a firm press of the hand to smooth the crown. Done, or nearly. Because now there's the matter of the hairpiece. It's subtle, nearly indistinguishable from her real hair, but it's there. A woven switch, added for volume. Victorian women often collect their own shed hair from brushes, store it in small porcelain jars, and later send it to wig makers to craft into pads or rats. It's intimate recycling and practical. The result is a custom-fit hairpiece that blends seamlessly with their natural locks. In wealthier households, full wigs are avoided unless medically necessary, but small augmentations are almost expected. There's even a small industry dedicated to this need. Hair merchants operate quietly, discreetly. Some have shops, others travel door to door. They carry velvet sample books showcasing real human hair in various shades. Light ash, honey brown, deep auburn, raven black. A lady selects the closest match, places her order, and within a fortnight receives a carefully knotted switch, hand-tied and ready to blend. Where this hair comes from? That's a question not often asked, but history whispers its answers. Convents, orphanages, even the heads of the desperately poor. One can't help but wonder if, buried within the coils of a duchess's braid, there lies the strand of a girl who sold her childhood locks for sixpence. That silent mingling of lives, that invisible exchange, it adds an almost ghostly intimacy to these hairstyles. But perhaps the most exhausting part of the ritual is the emotional load. Victorian hair isn't just about beauty, it's about control. A woman begins her day by quite literally binding herself, shaping her outward appearance to fit the mould. Hair becomes performance. Each twist and pin a line in the script. It's exhausting, and yet it's essential. The lady stands now. Her hair is complete, her spine straight, her breathing shallow under the corset's grip. She's transformed, not just into a beauty, but into a message. She walks to the door and rings for her carriage. Somewhere across town another woman begins the same process. Hers is younger, unmarried, newly introduced to society. She sits giddy in her chair, chattering nervously as her sister fastens a cascade of sausage curls down her back. These curls, carefully styled to bounce with each step, symbolise youth and vitality. For many Victorian women, curls are a way of freezing time, preserving girlhood for just a few more seasons before marriage and motherhood claim it. Of course, not all curls are natural. Curling rods, heated over flame and prone to causing accidental burns, are wielded with both caution and resignation. Some women sleep in rag rollers overnight, their heads full of tight spirals in hopes of waking with angelic waves. Others opt for permanent waving solutions, chemical treatments that smell vaguely of ammonia and desperation. It's innovation, it's madness, it's hair. Among aristocrats, hairdressing becomes a competitive sport. A few enterprising women even employ coiffure artists, often of French origin, who treat hair not as fabric, but sculpture. These artists travel between households, offering their services before major events. Their tools are mysterious, their airs theatrical. They speak in hushed tones of fashion trends from Paris, styles inspired by the Empress, secrets gleaned from salons in the Faubourg. A visit from a celebrated hairdresser might cost more than a month's wages for the average maid, but it's worth it. Especially if the Duchess's niece is rumoured to attend the same opera. And if her hair is taller than yours? Well, one simply mustn't allow that. Hairdressing manuals begin to circulate, some published under anonymous names, others attributed to well-known beauty experts. Titles like The Lady's Self-Instructor in Hair Arrangement and The Practical Hairdresser's Guide find their way into parlours and dressing rooms. They contain diagrams, advice, and, always, a warning not to stray too far from decency. But even with manuals, nothing replaces experience. Many women learn through imitation. They visit friends, attend church, watch how others wear their hair, and experiment behind closed doors. A failed style might prompt a tearful redressing. A successful one might draw a compliment, scribbled down later in a private journal. Mrs. Halford admired my braid arrangement, one might write. She mistook it for my own hair, delightful. Sometimes hair sparks scandal. One such incident occurs at a garden party where a guest's switch comes loose mid-laugh, dangling from her hat like a dead vine. She excuses herself, of course, and returns minutes later, composed, but the damage is done. The rumour mill spins. Was it her own switch, or borrowed? Had she mispinned it, or had someone pulled it loose on purpose? These are the dramas that fuel entire tea services, and in quiet moments, when the corsets are unfastened and the guests have departed, the hair is undone. Slowly, reverently. A woman removes each pin with care, laying them beside her like artifacts. The switch comes out. The curls relax. The tight scalp breathes. It's an intimate undoing, almost ritualistic. For a moment she's just herself, no longer a symbol, no longer a silhouette. Her hair falls around her shoulders, limp and free. She reaches for the brush again, strokes away the tension, and lets the candlelight catch the auburn shimmer in the glass. Tomorrow it begins again. The allure of thick, glossy hair was so powerful in Victorian society that women went to extraordinary lengths to cultivate it, not always with their own hair. Wigs and hairpieces, often dismissed today as theatrical or artificial, were in fact an essential part of the beauty arsenal for many Victorian women. Sometimes a secret, sometimes a necessity, always an artful illusion. Picture a bustling London salon in the late 1860s. The scent of pomade mingles with the faint tang of human hair, while mirrors capture the gentle whirl of scissors and heated curling irons. In one corner, a wig maker meticulously works with locks sourced from across the empire, golden strands from India, deep chestnut tresses from Italy, and raven black hair harvested quietly from convents. The trade in human hair is booming, a hidden economy shrouded in whispers and discreet transactions. Victorian women aren't shy about augmenting their natural hair with what's called switches, small removable bundles of hair designed to add volume or length. Some even sport full wigs, especially those suffering from hair loss due to illness or stress, though these were less common among the elite who preferred the natural look. However, the line between natural and artificial is often so finely blurred that no one might ever know. The hairpieces aren't just added at random. They are carefully colour-matched, blended with oils and powders to match the wearer's natural hue. They are styled, curled, and pinned with such precision that the eye can barely detect where real ends and fake begins. Some women even dye their own hair to better match the switches or wigs they intend to wear. The commitment to consistency borders on obsession. Historians still argue whether Victorian women viewed hairpieces as a mere practical enhancement or as a necessary deception. The social pressure to conform to ideals of beauty was immense. Thin or patchy hair was a source of shame, and a woman with less than perfect locks risked gossip that could damage her reputation and marriage prospects. A wig or switch could transform not only her look, but her social standing. Not all hairpieces were created equal. Wealthy women commissioned custom pieces, hand-tied by skilled wig makers, who sometimes worked for royal clients. These pieces could be extraordinarily elaborate, built up with wireframes and pads to create towering hairstyles. In fact, the French twist style, so iconic today, was often built atop a foundation of padding and hairpieces. In contrast, middle and working class women might use simpler switches or even improvise with dyed yarn or horsehair, less convincing but better than bare patches. Some dealers offered hair extensions made from the hair of recently deceased individuals, a practice that would make modern consumers shudder, but was accepted if not openly discussed at the time. This use of others' hair added a layer of mystique and discomfort. For example, hair sourced from convents was prized for its fine texture, but also came with an air of sanctity or superstition. Some believed it carried the blessing or curse of its previous owner. Tales circulated of women fainting upon learning their hairpiece was made from the hair of a criminal or a pauper. These fringe beliefs didn't stop the market from thriving. In fact, hair merchants operated a surprisingly sophisticated business. Agents travelled the country, collecting hair in towns and villages, often offering cash for good, clean hair. Sometimes desperate women and girls sold their locks to help feed their families. There were stories, some exaggerated, some true, of unscrupulous dealers cutting hair without consent, sometimes even stealing from graves or the heads of sleeping children. The ethical questions remain murky. Yet hair remained a prized commodity, not unlike gold or silk, and a tangible link between women from different walks of life. One particularly curious Victorian phenomenon was the rat, a small pad of hair used to bulk up hairstyles. Rats were often made from the wearer's own collected shed hair or purchased hair woven into mats. They could be placed strategically to raise a bun or puff out a crown. These rats were small but mighty, enabling women to achieve the larger-than-life hairstyles that society demanded without the need for massive heavy wigs. Creating the perfect rat required skill. It had to be dense enough to hold shape but light enough to wear comfortably. It also had to be hidden completely beneath the natural hair, lest the illusion fail. A poorly concealed rat could cause social embarrassment. Imagine the surprise when a gust of wind revealed a tiny hair monster perched atop your head. To maintain these elaborate structures, women relied on a suite of aids, pomades, oils, powders, and sometimes even glue. Pomades often included bear grease or other animal fats, creating a thick, sticky base to hold curls and pins in place. Powdered starch was dusted lightly to add texture and tame stray hairs. There was also the hair receiver, a small glass container placed on the dressing table, used to collect the shed hairs from brushes. These were not thrown away but saved, cleaned and eventually repurposed into rats or hairpieces. It's both practical and a little eerie to think of a woman's shed hair becoming part of her future hairstyle. In fact, Victorian hair care blends modern ingenuity with a dash of the macabre. The tools used for styling were just as complex. Heated curling irons, often made of metal and shaped like tongs, were warmed on stovetops or candles. They required deft hands and nerves of steel, as a moment's carelessness could result in burns or singed locks. Some women prided themselves on their ability to withstand the heat, equating pain with beauty, a tradition dating back centuries but never more literal than here. Historians still debate the extent to which women willingly endured these painful treatments, versus feeling coerced by social expectations. Additionally, hairpieces and wigs required regular maintenance. They had to be washed, styled, and sometimes repaired by the wearer or her maid. Wigs, in particular, could become breeding grounds for lice and required careful cleaning with vinegar washes or special powders. A neglected wig was a scandal waiting to happen. Among the upper classes, hairpieces also became canvases for adornment. Jewels, ribbons, feathers and flowers were woven into hair to mark occasions. A single jet comb might indicate mourning, bright ribbons might celebrate a holiday or ball. In more theatrical circles, hairpieces allowed women to transform entirely, becoming exotic queens, mythical creatures, or historical figures. The stage demanded exaggeration, and wigs were central to that transformation. While wigs might be associated today with powdered, over-the-top 18th century styles, Victorian wigs were generally subtler, aiming to enhance rather than overpower natural beauty. Yet they still permitted an element of fantasy and escape. One of the more unusual practices involved hair jewellery, where women's locks, often their own, but sometimes those of a loved one, were intricately woven into brooches, rings and bracelets. This artful preservation of hair extended beyond mere decoration. It was a form of emotional memento, a way to carry a loved one's essence. Sometimes women would commission hairpieces made entirely from their own or a family member's hair. This practice blurred the line between fashion and memory, creating wearable relics. Of course, hairpieces were not without stigma. Some moralists condemned them as deceitful, suggesting that a woman who wore anything but her natural hair was engaging in falsehood. Others worried that dependence on hairpieces encouraged vanity and superficiality. Yet, these criticisms rarely slowed the demand. Indeed, the very existence of hairpieces reflects the Victorian paradox. A society obsessed with outward appearances and strict propriety, yet deeply engaged in subterfuge and illusion. This duality echoes in other Victorian customs, where outward restraint masks inner turmoil and private rebellion. Hair, as both a literal and metaphorical covering, captures this tension perfectly. At the end of the day, whether composed of natural hair or carefully crafted switches and rats, a Victorian woman's hairstyle is a testament to her place in the world. It is an armour of beauty, a language of symbols, and a silent companion to her daily performance. And beneath all the pins and pomades, it's a story of lives intertwined, of hair gathered from distant places, transformed into something uniquely personal, worn proudly atop the heads of women whose stories might otherwise be lost to time. Not all Victorian hairstyles celebrate life and vitality. Some bear the weight of grief with sombre elegance. Mourning in the Victorian era is no mere fashion statement. It's a social institution, a code that governs not only dress but also hair. When death enters a household, it changes everything, including the crowns atop women's heads. Consider a widow in mid-Victorian England. The world around her carries on, but her hair and dress are subdued, reflecting her sorrow and status. Mourning hairstyles are austere yet intricate, shaped by strict etiquette and deeply personal emotion. The transformation is both public and private, a visible sign to society of loss and respect, but also a deeply intimate ritual of memory and attachment. In the immediate aftermath of death, a widow's hair is often parted sharply in the middle, slicked flat against the scalp with minimal adornment. The use of dark, jet-black combs and pins, sometimes adorned with small mourning symbols like skulls or weeping willows, is common. These accessories are subtle but unmistakable signs of grief. Mourning hairstyles evolve through stages, mirroring the complex Victorian mourning process itself. Initially, the widow wears full mourning, characterised by all-black attire and simple, restrained hairstyles. After a set period, usually a year or more, she may enter half mourning, introducing muted colours like grey, lavender or mauve, and allowing for slightly less austere hair decorations. What's fascinating, and rather macabre, is how hair itself becomes both a symbol and a token of mourning. Locks of hair, carefully cut and preserved, become sacred keepsakes. These are often woven into intricate patterns, fashioned into wreaths or framed in ornate lockets. Some families commission entire wreaths of hair, representing the deceased and the living intertwined forever. Hair becomes a physical manifestation of memory, tangible proof of love and loss. This practice, known as mourning hairwork, enjoys immense popularity throughout the century. Artisans specialise in weaving hair into complex motifs, roses, knots, vines, each design layered with symbolic meaning. Some mourning pieces are lavish, reserved for the wealthy. Others are modest, handmade by grieving relatives. For many, hairwork is more than decoration. It's a form of connection. Wearing or displaying a lock of hair transforms grief into art, transforming absence into presence. Victorian society encourages these tokens as acceptable, even noble, expressions of emotion. Yet there's a darker underside to this custom. Historians still argue whether hairwork was purely sentimental, or if it occasionally masked more complicated emotions, obsession, control, or even morbid fascination with death. Some pieces, astonishingly lifelike, verge on the eerie. Imagine a wreath that looks almost like a tiny forest of hair, each strand meticulously arranged, the memory of a loved one forever trapped in a frozen moment. The sale and exchange of hair for mourning purposes created a unique market. Hair merchants not only provided switches and wigs for beauty, but also hair bundles specifically for mourning jewellery. Black hair was especially prized. The demand encouraged a complex supply chain, sometimes raising uncomfortable questions about the origin of the hair. For widows, the management of their hair during mourning is both ritual and burden. Some found comfort in the daily act of caring for their restrained styles. Others felt trapped, their grief codified into unyielding fashion. The hair, flattened and bound, can be as confining as the corset beneath their dresses. Interestingly, the Queen herself, Queen Victoria, becomes an icon of mourning. After the death of Prince Albert in 1861, she withdraws from public life, adopting an austere style that includes tightly bound hair, veils, and black attire. Her grief influences the entire empire, sparking a cultural fixation on mourning customs that last for decades. Through Queen Victoria's example, mourning hairstyles shift from private ritual to public spectacle. Women across the social spectrum adopt the Queen's sombre styles, signalling their loyalty and shared sorrow. The Queen's hair becomes a silent sermon on loss, duty, and endurance. Meanwhile, the emotional power of morning hair transcends simple fashion. For some, the hair rituals provide a way to exert control amid chaos. Grief can be overwhelming and disorienting. Shaping the hair daily offers structure and purpose. Every pin, every comb, becomes a small victory against despair. But morning hairstyles are not without social risk. Improper observance can provoke scandal or gossip. A widow who removes mourning attire too early, or who wears overly elaborate hair accessories during mourning, is accused of insensitivity or worse, impropriety. Hair, like dress, is a measure of character and respectability. Some women use mourning hairstyles as a subtle form of expression. For example, wearing a slightly more decorative comb than society expects might signal resilience, or a quiet protest against the constraints of grief. Others might allow a few curls to escape strict bindings, hinting at their inner turmoil. In more fringe circles, hair is used to communicate darker, secret meanings. Certain braid patterns or knots may symbolize enduring love beyond death, or warnings to potential suitors. Victorian hair codes are a rich, mysterious language, often accessible only to insiders. Mourning hair also intersects with the broader Victorian fascination with death and the supernatural. The popularity of spirit photography, seances and mourning dolls, figures made to resemble deceased relatives, reflects a culture deeply engaged with mortality. Hair, as a physical remnant of the body, fits neatly into this tableau. In some cases, women would incorporate deceased family members' hair into their own hairstyles, braiding it into their braids or wrapping it around combs. This act blurs the line between memory and presence, life and death. It's a practice that can feel eerie today, but was, for many Victorians, an act of devotion. Meanwhile, children's mourning hair customs develop in parallel. When young relatives die, families often cut locks from their hair to include in mourning wreaths or jewellery. These tokens serve as reminders of innocence lost and the fragility of life. Notably, the emotional weight of hair in mourning also led to unusual superstitions. Some believed that hair left uncut or uncombed might trap a restless spirit. Others worried that cutting too much hair too soon might sever a vital connection. These beliefs, though not universally held, added layers of meaning to hair care in times of grief. Despite all the rules and symbolism, mourning hairstyles, like all Victorian hair, are ultimately human. They tell stories of love, loss, identity, and survival. They speak of women navigating a world that demanded both public display and private pain, where hair was both a shield and a confession. So when you see a Victorian portrait of a woman with tightly pinned darkened hair, remember, beneath those sombre coils lies a complex dance of social expectation and personal mourning. The carefully crafted style is not just about beauty, it is about memory, power, and the enduring human desire to hold on, even when everything has changed. As twilight falls over Victorian England, the public face of a woman's hair begins to change once more. Evening events, balls, operas, dinners, demand a different kind of styling, one that mingles elegance with a dash of daring. Daytime restraint gives way to nocturnal flair, yet the rules remain complex and unyielding. The evening hairstyle is both a secret performance and a carefully measured display, an essential part of a woman's social armour. Unlike the orderly, centred parts of daytime, evening hair often features elaborate curls and waves, designed to catch candlelight and turn heads. Hair might be swept high atop the crown, revealing the delicate curve of the neck and shoulders, a daring exposure in a society that prizes modesty above all. Here, every lock seems to shimmer with intention, every curl whispers seduction and sophistication. The process begins early. Women retreat to their dressing rooms, where maids and hairdressers assemble the evening look piece by piece. Hot irons, curling papers, pomades and pins are deployed in precise choreography. In wealthier homes, hairdressers trained in the latest Parisian techniques bring secrets from the continent, turning hair into sculptural art. The concept of the evening coiffure quickly evolves through the Victorian decades. By the 1870s, styles like the looped chignon and the braided crown become fashionable. Hair is sometimes parted to one side, with soft ringlets cascading down temples or necks. These cascading curls, frizzes, in contemporary slang, balance the tension between elegance and playful flirtation. Jewellery plays a starring role. Combs set with jet, mother of pearl or precious stones adorn hairstyles, positioned to catch the flickering candlelight in ballrooms. Feathers, particularly ostrich plumes dyed in vibrant colours, add drama and height. The more extravagant the event, the more elaborate the adornments. Even the colour of hair accessories sends signals. Black combs and beads often indicate mourning or solemnity. Vibrant ribbons and flowers suggest celebration. The interplay between hair and accessory is a language all its own. However, such elaborate styling does not come without a cost. Wearing towering coiffures can be physically taxing. Women report headaches from tightly pulled hair and neck strained from heavy hairpieces and accessories. Social commentary of the day reflects these complaints, with satirical cartoons poking fun at the woman whose hair holds more weight than her wit. One of the more curious accessories is the hair snood, a net or mesh that contains curls and waves, keeping them tidy during social occasions. Though practical, it is often decorated with ribbons and beads, transforming it from mere utility to fashionable statement. Evening hairstyles also intersect with a growing interest in the exotic. Inspired by colonialism and the arts, some women incorporate elements reminiscent of foreign cultures, feathers, intricate braids, and unusual ornamentation. While sometimes appropriative by modern standards, these styles reflect Victorian curiosity and a desire to stand out. Behind closed doors, however, these glamorous styles conceal layers of complexity. Heat from fireplaces and crowded rooms threatens to loosen curls and flatten towering buns. Women carry discreet pins and combs in their reticules for emergency touch-ups. One misplaced curl or fallen feather could mean a loss of composure, or worse, social embarrassment. Historians still argue the degree to which evening hairstyles allowed Victorian women freedom of expression. Were these styles liberating, offering a moment to escape daytime constraints? Or were they merely another form of performance, binding women to ever more complex societal expectations? The truth likely lies somewhere in between. For many, the evening coiffure is a source of empowerment, a way to command attention, embody grace, and signal status. For others, it's a cage, demanding hours of preparation and fraught with anxiety over imperfections. Consider the story of a young debutante attending her first ball. She spends the afternoon under the watchful eye of her mother and maid, carefully arranging her hair into a high, braided bun accented with tiny flowers. The sensation is both thrilling and terrifying. She feels transformed but also exposed, every eye on her in a room full of strangers. The scent of rosewater mingles with perfume, the soft scratch of pins against metal, the flicker of gaslight. She practices the tilt of her head in the mirror, rehearsing smiles and glances. Her hair, a sculptural masterpiece, is her first public mask. Yet, beneath the surface, her scalp aches from the pins, and a single stray hair betrays hours of effort. Still, she will wear it proudly. Tonight, her hair is her armour, her invitation, and her silent declaration. The social importance of hair extends to men as well, but Victorian men's hairstyles remain relatively simple in comparison. For women, hair is an essential part of social currency. It's a tool wielded with care, a weapon in the subtle battles of status and attraction. Salon culture thrives as well. In urban centres like London, Paris and New York, hair salons become hubs of fashion and gossip. Women gather to learn the latest techniques, share news and seek affirmation. Salon visits are a ritual, blending beauty care with social networking. The rise of photography also transforms hair culture. Portraits, cast to visit, and eventually photographic studios capture women's hairstyles in exquisite detail, immortalizing trends and personal achievements. Some women guard these images jealously, others use them to influence and inspire, and yet, despite the outward beauty, many Victorian women experience hair challenges that remain largely hidden. Scalp irritation from heavy styling products, hair thinning caused by tight hairstyles, and the spread of lice are common complaints. Remedies are shared in hushed tones, vinegar rinses, herbal concoctions, and the occasional use of mercury-based treatments, harmful but popular. The willingness to endure such discomfort reflects the high stakes attached to hair appearance. In literature and art, hair often symbolises more than beauty. It represents virtue, passion, and even danger. A single loose curl might signal rebelliousness. A tightly bound bun might indicate submission to social norms. These coded meanings permeate Victorian culture, reinforcing hair's role as a potent symbol. Indeed, the hair of Victorian women is a silent but powerful character in the stories of their lives. As night deepens and chandeliers flicker, The women who have so carefully crafted their evening coiffures begin to relax. Pins come loose, curls loosen, and the rigid structures soften. The process reverses in the intimacy of bedrooms, where hair is gently combed free, oils reapplied, and preparation for the next day's ritual begins anew. Through all these transformations, daytime modesty, morning restraint, evening exuberance, Victorian hair remains a mirror of the complex social dance women perform. It is a language without words, a code of conformity and rebellion, a crown worn with both pride and burden. The story of Victorian hairstyles is ultimately the story of the women themselves, beautiful, complicated, striving, and human. If hair is the silent herald of Victorian womanhood, then the tools and products used to tame it are the unsung heroes, often unglamorous, sometimes downright bizarre, but always essential. Behind every perfect coiffure lies a cabinet of curiosities, oils, powders, brushes, and more, many of which would perplex or even horrify modern sensibilities. Victorian hair care is as much chemistry as artistry, a mix of tradition, innovation, and occasional desperation. The daily brushing ritual we met earlier is just the beginning. Brushes, typically made with boar bristles and wooden backs, are prized possessions. Some are elaborately decorated, with ivory handles or silver inlays. But their true power lies in their ability to stimulate the scalp and distribute natural oils, a process thought to promote healthy growth and shine. Women sometimes applied secret concoctions to their brushes, infusing them with scents like lavender or rose. The choice of hairbrush, like the hairstyle itself, was a social statement. A lavish brush could signal wealth and refinement. A plain one, practicality. Some even carried miniature brushes in their reticules for discreet touch-ups during the day. Hair oil was another cornerstone. Castor oil, coconut oil, and even bear grease were common ingredients. These thick, heavy substances promised to strengthen hair, prevent breakage, and add gloss. Yet their use came with trade-offs: sticky residue, unpleasant smells, and a tendency to attract dust. Women had to balance beauty with practicality. Too much oil and the hair looked greasy. Too little, and it dried brittle. Pomades, too, were a staple, often made from mixtures of beeswax, animal fats, and fragrant herbs. These could be scented with rose, orange blossom, or jasmine to mask the heavier odours. Pomades helped hold hairstyles in place, particularly curls and waves, but again could build up and require careful washing. Speaking of washing, Victorian hair hygiene was complicated. Hair was washed infrequently, sometimes only a few times a year, due in part to the laborious nature of the process, and partly to contemporary beliefs that too much washing could weaken hair. When washed, hair was scrubbed with soap and rinsed with vinegar or herbal infusions, leaving it soft and shiny. Historians still argue the exact reasons for this infrequency, whether it was due to limited access to water and baths, or a cultural preference for natural oils. Hair powder also held a place of honour. Unlike the white powders popular in earlier centuries, Victorian powders were often subtle and tinted. Rice powder was common, lending a matte finish and absorbing excess oils. Powder was especially important for those wearing dark pomades, as it helped prevent the hair from appearing too shiny or oily. Women would dust their hair with powders using fluffy pads or special boxes, which often doubled as delicate vanity items. Powder could be coloured, rose, lavender, or even pale blue, to complement an outfit or mood. The dangers of some products, however, were real. Mercury-based hair tonics were popular for promoting hair growth, but mercury is highly toxic. Lead and arsenic found their way into some dyes and powders, causing serious health problems. Victorian women often suffered from hair loss, scalp sores, and other ailments caused by these toxic substances. Yet, ignorance and social pressures kept these products in wide use. Victorian hair tools also tell a story of evolving technology. Curling irons, once dangerous metal rods heated over open flames, gradually became more refined. By mid-century, some salons experimented with safer electric curling irons, primitive by today's standards but revolutionary then. These innovations allowed for more intricate curls and waves, which were hallmarks of fashionable hairstyles. Combs made of tortoiseshell or ivory were treasured. Fine-toothed combs smoothed baby hairs and created clean parts, while wide-toothed versions helped detangle. Ornamental combs adorned with jet or carved wood added flair and could signify mourning or celebration, depending on design. An intriguing and often overlooked tool was the hair receiver. This small glass container sat on the dressing table, collecting shed hairs from brushes. Rather than discarded, these hairs were cleaned and stored, destined to become rats or hair pieces for future styling. The hair receiver represents a Victorian recycling practice born out of necessity and a desire for volume in hairstyles. Hair ribbons and nets also played crucial roles. Ribbons, often silk or velvet, helped secure buns and braids. Their colours followed strict social codes: black or dark purple for mourning, bright colours for festivities. Hair nets, made from fine threads, kept hair tidy, especially during travel or work. Some women crafted homemade concoctions to improve hair health. Recipes passed down in letters and diaries include mixtures of egg yolk, brandy, honey, and herbs like rosemary or chamomile. These natural treatments aim to stimulate growth and shine, reflecting a blend of folk wisdom and early beauty science. The influence of advertisements and patent medicines cannot be underestimated. Newspapers and magazines featured countless ads for hair tonics, growth stimulants, and scalp treatments. Claims were often extravagant, promising miraculous cures for baldness, dandruff, and greying hair. While some products had merit, many were snake oil, preying on women's insecurities. Curiously, hair dyes in the Victorian era were both popular and controversial. Natural dyes from henna or walnut shells were favoured for subtle colouring, but chemical dyes were emerging. Some women experimented with early ammonia-based dyes to darken or lighten their locks. These dyes were risky, often damaging the hair or causing allergic reactions, but they offered a degree of control over appearance not previously available. The social stigma around dyed hair varied. While some frowned upon it as artificial or vain, others embraced it as a means of self-expression. Historians still debate how widespread hair dye use was among different social classes. One cannot discuss Victorian hair products without mentioning the sometimes grim remedies for lice. Infestations were common, especially in crowded urban areas. Treatments included mixtures of kerosene, vinegar, or even arsenic-based powders. These could be harsh and dangerous, but were considered necessary evils to maintain social respectability. In this complex world of products and tools, the act of hair care becomes both a science and an art. The morning ritual, a delicate dance of brushing, oiling, parting, pinning and powdering, requires skill and patience. A single misstep might ruin hours of preparation or provoke whispered judgment. The Victorian woman who mastered her hair care routine was not merely vain but disciplined, wielding her appearance as a weapon and shield. Hair products, for all their oddities and dangers, were instruments in this silent struggle for control and identity. In quieter moments, a woman might pause to smell her rosewater bottle, feeling a fleeting sense of calm amid the chaos of daily life. She might finger the cool surface of her ivory comb, recalling its sentimental value or the hand that gifted it. These small connections between woman and object reveal the emotional dimension of Victorian hair care. Ultimately, the history of Victorian hair products and tools is a story of invention and adaptation, a mirror reflecting broader social currents of class, gender, and culture. It is also a cautionary tale of the lengths to which people will go for beauty, often at a cost hidden beneath the surface. As the evening deepens and the last rays of sunlight fade, the hairbrush is set aside, the pomade jar closed, and the hairdryer, or rather the bonnet hair steamer, quiets. The ritual pauses, awaiting the next day's ceremony, ready to begin again. In the labyrinth of Victorian hair culture, one figure often stands apart: the maid, the silent architect behind many a masterpiece hairstyle. Though the woman of the house may receive praise and admiration for her coiffure, it is often the unseen hands of her maid who toil behind the scenes, managing the complex process with patience, precision, and little recognition. The relationship between mistress and maid, within the intimate sphere of hairdressing, reveals much about class, gender, and power in Victorian England. Maid or lady, the hair routine is an elaborate production, requiring coordination, trust, and sometimes an unspoken tension. The maid's duties encompass washing, brushing, oiling, curling, pinning, and even crafting hairpieces or rats from shed hair. These tasks demand skill, a way with heated irons, the ability to create symmetrical styles, and an eye for colour matching when blending natural hair with switches. Many maids specialised in hairdressing, becoming experts over years of practice. They learned from their mistresses, from other servants, and from manuals that detailed the latest trends. Yet their labour was largely invisible, tucked away in upper chambers or behind dressing screens. The hours maids spent on hair could be long and tiring. Hairstyles were frequently rebuilt each day, sometimes twice. Morning and evening styles required different techniques and accessories. A single curled strand out of place might call for immediate correction. Hairpins, often numbering in the dozens, needed to be carefully managed to avoid injury. The maid's hands moved with quiet efficiency, their rhythm matching the cadence of Victorian life. Despite the servitude, some maids developed close bonds with their mistresses. These relationships could range from affectionate to fraught, but hairdressing moments often became intimate interludes, a pause from broader household duties. The maid was a confidant, a keeper of secrets, a partner in maintaining appearances. It's easy to romanticize this bond, but reality was harsher. Maids had limited agency and worked under strict hierarchies. Mistakes in hairstyling could provoke sharp reprimands, and social distance was always maintained. A misplaced hairpin was a visible failure, one that could ripple through the rigid order of the household. Interestingly, Victorian etiquette manuals often advised mistresses to treat their maids kindly during hair routines. The gentle touch and patient demeanour supposedly produced better results. Yet the pressures of social expectation meant these moments were often charged with unspoken demands and anxieties. For many working-class women, the skills gained through hairdressing in service could become a form of economic mobility. Some maids left service to open hairdressing salons, capitalising on their expertise. The profession of hairdresser, female and male, became a respectable trade, blending artistry with commerce. Hairdressing schools began to emerge by the late 19th century, offering formal training and elevating the craft. These institutions reflected broader social shifts, including women's increased participation in the workforce and the commodification of beauty. But not all hairdressing occurred in grand houses. Working-class women, with fewer resources and time, adapted hair routines to their realities. Simpler styles, fewer accessories, and homemade remedies were common. Yet the desire to present a neat, respectable appearance persisted across classes. The tools maids used were often less ornate, but no less essential. A humble wooden brush, a handful of pins, and a few scraps of ribbon could transform a worn look into something dignified. In fact, thrift and resourcefulness were prized. Reusing shed hair for rats or repurposing broken combs was standard. Despite these efforts, Victorian domestic service could be exhausting and dehumanising. Long hours, strict discipline, and social invisibility marked the maid's experience. Hairdressing offered moments of creativity and connection, but also reinforced the boundaries between servant and mistress. Historians still debate how much agency maids had within these constraints. Some argue that mastering hairdressing empowered women to carve out niches of control and pride. Others emphasise the persistent inequalities and exploitation embedded in service. Within the social theatre of hair, then, the maid plays a dual role, invisible labourer and skilled artisan. She shapes not only hair but social identity. The gloss of a lady's locks owes much to her unacknowledged hands. This relationship also reflects wider Victorian attitudes toward gender and class. The emphasis on outward appearance, conformity, and control mirrors the hierarchies governing all aspects of life. Hairdressing becomes a microcosm of power dynamics, where beauty is both weapon and chain. Intriguingly, some maids used hairdressing knowledge to subvert norms. Anecdotes exist of servants secretly styling their own hair in ways that flirted with fashion or personal expression. They might weave ribbons in vibrant colours or fashion loose curls, defying expectations of simplicity. Such acts, small and private, hint at resistance beneath the surface of service. Similarly, mistresses sometimes delegated hairdressing to female relatives or friends, turning it into a social event. Visiting salons or hosting coiffure parties allowed women to bond and share beauty secrets. These gatherings fostered community but also reinforced the performance of femininity. In all these ways, Victorian hairdressing is more than mere grooming. It is a social ritual layered with meaning. As twilight deepens and household bustle fades, the maid cleans the tools, tidies the hairpieces, and prepares for the next day. Her work, like the hair itself, is a cycle, endless, meticulous, and indispensable. And in this delicate interplay of power and beauty, the hairdresser's hands write stories that time often forgets. The influence of Victorian literature and art on hair fashions is profound and often overlooked. Yet these creative realms played a pivotal role in shaping the hairstyles women chose, or felt compelled to wear. Writers, painters, and illustrators did more than capture the zeitgeist. They created ideals, fantasies, and cautionary tales that wove into the cultural fabric of hair and beauty. Their visions shaped not only public perception, but also private practices, blurring the line between reality and imagination. Imagine stepping into a Victorian parlour, the walls adorned with portraits of elegantly coiffed women, their hair flowing or intricately braided, eyes gazing into the distance as if pondering secrets. These images were more than decorative. They were templates, aspirational icons for women who longed to embody such grace. Artists like John Everett Millais and Dante Gabriel Rossetti, prominent figures of the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood, infused their works with luscious, often fiery red hair, associating these hues with passion, strength, and mystery. Women copied these images, striving to mimic the natural waves and rich colours captured on canvas. This admiration led to an increased demand for hair dyes, particularly for red and auburn shades, which were less common naturally in Britain, but highly prized for their romantic associations. Novels of the era added another layer of influence. Authors such as Charles Dickens, the Bronte sisters, and Elizabeth Gaskell crafted characters whose physical descriptions often emphasised their hair as a reflection of personality. The heroine's loose curls might symbolise youthful innocence or rebellious spirit, while a villain's slicked-back hair could signify control and coldness. Readers internalised these descriptions, seeing hair as a coded language to understand character and morality. This literary symbolism seeped into everyday life. A woman might style her hair to convey virtue, passion, or social status, consciously or unconsciously, performing the roles written for her by popular fiction. Magazines and illustrated periodicals also contributed to this cultural dialogue. Publications like the Illustrated London News and Harper's Bazaar featured fashion plates showcasing the latest hairstyles, often inspired by literary heroines or famous actresses. These images circulated widely, influencing trends beyond the elite, reaching the burgeoning middle classes eager to emulate aristocratic styles. Interestingly, some writers used hair to critique society or explore taboo themes. For example, the fallen woman trope, common in Victorian literature, often involved hair symbolism. A woman who defied social norms might be described as having wild, unkempt hair, signifying loss of control or moral decay. Conversely, strict adherence to hairstyle conventions marked respectability and submission to social order. These narratives reinforced gender expectations, making hair both a symbol of power and a tool of oppression. Victorian theatre further amplified hair's performative aspect. Actresses relied on elaborate wigs and styles to transform into characters ranging from virtuous maidens to seductive sirens. Stage lighting and distance necessitated exaggerated coiffures, pushing hairstyling into theatrical art. The public's fascination with theatrical hair influenced everyday fashion. Women borrowed styles seen on stage for social events, eager to evoke the glamour and drama associated with performance. Some actresses themselves became trendsetters, their hairstyles imitated in salons across the country. Yet the theatricality of hair was a double-edged sword. While it allowed for creativity and self-expression, it also heightened scrutiny. A woman whose hairstyle was deemed too flamboyant risked gossip or scandal, accused of vanity or immodesty. Within the art world, the Pre-Raphaelites' focus on naturalism and medieval aesthetics inspired a revival of traditional braiding and flowing hair. Their subjects often appeared with long, unbound locks, an image at odds with Victorian restraint. This tension between freedom and control in hairstyling reflects broader cultural debates about femininity and morality. The emergence of photography added another dimension. Early portraits froze hairstyles in time, sometimes for generations. Women sent photographs of themselves to hairdressers, seeking to replicate the styles captured. This practice marks a shift toward the modern era, where visual media shape personal identity and fashion choices. Yet photographic technology also highlighted the fragility of Victorian hairstyles. The glare of early cameras exposed the artificiality of some wigs and hairpieces, challenging their illusion. Women and stylists had to adapt, balancing realism with beauty. The cultural conversations around hair in art and literature thus created a feedback loop. Artistic portrayals influenced hairstyles, which then inspired new creative works. This dynamic interplay sustained Victorian hair culture's vibrancy and complexity. Moreover, hair became a metaphor in poetry and prose, representing themes of freedom, entrapment, sensuality, and virtue. Poets like Alfred Lord Tennyson and Christina Rossetti wove images of hair into their verses, using it to evoke mood and meaning. This symbolic richness made hair an object of fascination beyond mere aesthetics. Historians still debate the extent to which artistic representations reflected actual practices versus idealized fantasies. Some argue that Victorian women selectively adopted styles seen in art, adapting them to social constraints. Others suggest that art directly shaped behaviour, driving fashion trends and personal choices. In either case, the dialogue between art and life deepened the cultural significance of hair, making it a site where identity, aspiration and social order converged. As night falls and candlelight flickers across the pages of novels and the surfaces of portraits, the Victorian woman's hair remains a living canvas, a reflection of stories told and lived, imagined and performed. In the quiet moments before sleep, one might wonder whose image inspired the gentle curl resting against her cheek, or which heroine's fiery locks stirred a longing for something beyond the day's duties. Victorian hair, in all its forms and meanings, continues to whisper tales of beauty, power, and the enduring human desire to be seen and remembered. The social gatherings of Victorian England, balls, garden parties, dinners and operas, served not only as opportunities for entertainment and courtship, but also as grand stages for the display of hairstyles. In these glittering assemblies, a woman's coiffure was her silent announcement of status, personality and intentions. The stakes were high. A single misplaced curl or poorly chosen adornment could ripple through the gossip mills, altering reputations and prospects. The preparation for such events was an elaborate affair, often beginning hours earlier. Women would retreat to their dressing rooms, where maids or hairdressers would sculpt their hair into the desired style, adding carefully selected accessories. The process was ritualistic, a passage from the private self to the public persona. One of the most popular styles for formal occasions was the Gibson girl look, emerging in the late Victorian period and into the Edwardian era. Characterised by a voluminous, loosely piled bun with soft waves framing the face, it suggested both elegance and an effortless charm. Though named after the American illustrator Charles Dana Gibson, the style quickly gained traction across Britain, symbolising a modern ideal of womanhood, independent yet refined. Before the Gibson girl's rise, however, Victorian evening hairstyles favoured more rigid structures, towering chignons, intricate braids woven into crowns, or ringlets cascading over shoulders. These designs required mastery and endurance, as they were often heavy and difficult to maintain through hours of dancing and socialising. Jewellery and decorative elements enhanced these styles. Fresh flowers were particularly fashionable for garden parties or summer balls, lending a natural freshness. Pearls, ribbons, combs set with jet or tortoiseshell, and even miniature bird feathers added layers of texture and symbolism. Colour coding was subtle but meaningful. White flowers might suggest purity or new beginnings, while darker feathers could hint at sophistication or mourning. The choice of adornment often reflected the nature of the event and the woman's mood or message. The positioning of hair accessories also carried social weight. For instance, a comb worn at the back of the head might be standard, while placing it higher or off-centre could indicate flirtation or personal style. These subtle signals were understood by peers, turning hair into a language of glances and guesses. The practical challenges of maintaining such styles during events were considerable. Women carried spare pins, small combs and hand mirrors to adjust their coiffures in powder rooms or discreet corners. The social etiquette around these moments was delicate. One had to appear effortlessly perfect, avoiding signs of fatigue or distress. Dancing itself tested hairstyles to their limits. The vigorous movements of waltzes, polkas and quadrilles could loosen pins or flatten curls. Stories abound of ladies discreetly adjusting their hair mid-dance, or relying on companions for quick fixes. Interestingly, the choice of hairstyle could influence social opportunities. A woman whose hair appeared well cared for and fashionable was more likely to attract desirable suitors. Conversely, a dishevelled or outdated style might imply neglect or lower status, limiting prospects in the competitive marriage market. The significance of hair extended to the role of the hostess. Women organising social gatherings often took great care to present themselves impeccably, using their hairstyles to project authority and grace. Their coiffures set the tone for the event, signalling the level of formality and expected decorum. Garden parties in particular inspired a unique set of hair fashions. The outdoor setting allowed for lighter styles, often adorned with natural elements like ribbons and flowers. These gatherings encouraged a blending of social classes, bringing together aristocracy, gentry, and rising middle classes. Hair became a visual marker of these interactions, balancing tradition with emerging modernity. Evening operas and theatre outings demanded yet another kind of hair presentation. The darkened, crowded theatres posed challenges for hair visibility, encouraging more dramatic styles with height and volume. Women competed for attention not only through dress, but also through the magnificence of their coiffures. Opera boxes became miniature stages where hair was as much on display as gowns and jewellery. The flicker of gaslight on jewels and the shimmer of glossy curls created an atmosphere of glamour and intrigue. This culture of display extended beyond formal events. Afternoon teas, shopping outings, and church attendance each had their unwritten hair codes. The variety of acceptable styles for different occasions reflected the complex social web Victorians navigated daily. These strict conventions also produced a form of resistance. Some women experimented with more relaxed or unconventional hairstyles in private or among close friends. The tension between public expectation and private desire created a dynamic landscape of hair fashion, always evolving. Hair magazines and manuals proliferated, offering advice and patterns for styles suited to every occasion. These publications democratized hair fashion, allowing women from diverse backgrounds to participate in cultural trends. Some featured step-by-step illustrations, while others offered moral guidance, cautioning against excessive vanity. Humour found its way into this world as well. Satirical cartoons in periodicals like Punch poked fun at the absurd lengths women went to for their hairstyles. Images of towering hair castles, or women struggling under the weight of their coiffures, provided comic relief amid the serious business of social performance. The physical burden of elaborate hairstyles was also a topic of commentary. Reports of neck pain, headaches, and fatigue surfaced, reminding us that beauty had a price. Yet, the drive to conform and excel often outweighed discomfort. In the end, Victorian social events were theatres of appearance, where hair served as a vital script element. It communicated status, intentions, and identity in a society where much was unspoken. As candles burn low and the last dance concludes, women retreat to quieter spaces to undo their hair's splendour, shedding the public mask and reclaiming private selves. This cycle of transformation, day to night, public to private, is at the heart of Victorian hair culture, revealing the intricate interplay between beauty, society, and individuality. Word count: 2098. Awaiting continue. Section 11. Among the most captivating yet mysterious aspects of Victorian hair culture is the art and craft of hair jewellery and hairwork. These delicate creations, woven, braided and shaped from the actual hair of loved ones, served as tokens of affection, remembrance, and even status. The practice, both deeply personal and widely popular, reveals a Victorian fascination with intimacy, memory, and the physical embodiment of relationships. Hairwork traces its origins far beyond the Victorian era, but it reached its zenith during the 19th century. At its core, hair jewellery transformed something typically discarded, fallen or cut hair, into treasured keepsakes. Lockets, brooches, rings, and wreaths, composed of intricate patterns of hair, weave a silent narrative of connection and loss. The process is painstaking. Artisans, often trained in specialised workshops, twist and braid strands of hair into flowers, knots, and geometric designs. The choice of pattern, length, and even colour carries symbolic meaning. For instance, braided hearts might represent love and fidelity, while woven wreaths suggested eternity. These pieces were not merely sentimental, they were fashionable and often costly. The complexity of the work signified wealth and refined taste, and owning hair jewellery became a mark of social sophistication. Mourning hairwork, in particular, held profound significance. After the death of a loved one, families commissioned or created pieces from the deceased's hair as tangible reminders of presence beyond the grave. Some families crafted elaborate wreaths combining hair from multiple relatives, symbolising unity and remembrance. Queen Victoria herself was a significant influence in popularising mourning hair jewellery. Following Prince Albert's death, she commissioned many such pieces and openly displayed her own mourning hair ornaments, inspiring subjects across the empire to adopt similar customs. Beyond mourning, hair work also celebrated life's milestones. Engagements, weddings, and births were occasions for exchanging hair jewellery, embedding familial and emotional ties in physical form. Women might incorporate hair from themselves, spouses, children, or close friends, creating heirlooms passed down through generations. The Victorian fascination with hair work also dovetails with broader cultural attitudes toward death and memory. In an era marked by high mortality rates, especially among infants and children, such tangible memorials offered solace and a sense of continuity. This practice, however, was not without its peculiarities. Some pieces verge on the uncanny, resembling tiny sculptures or even miniature forests of hair. Modern observers might find them eerie, but for Victorians they were precious embodiments of love and loyalty. The symbolism of hair jewellery extended into literature and poetry, where it appeared as metaphors for connection and loss. Poets described hair wreaths as circles of eternity, or threads binding souls beyond the mortal realm. In some social circles, hair work also played a role in courtship rituals. Exchanging a ring or brooch made from one's hair was a deeply intimate gesture, signifying trust and commitment. These tokens were often worn publicly, silently communicating relationship status and emotional bonds. The artistry required to produce high-quality hair jewellery elevated it to a form of fine craftsmanship. Some workshops advertised their services extensively, showcasing samples in catalogues and exhibitions. Competitions for the finest hairwork pieces were common at fairs, highlighting both creativity and technical skill. Hair jewellery also intersected with the burgeoning Industrial Revolution. As mass production took hold, some hairwork became more standardised, with kits and ready-made components available to amateurs. Yet handcrafted pieces remained highly prized for their uniqueness and emotional value. For women who could not afford elaborate jewellery, homemade hairwork was a practical alternative. Patterns and instructions circulated in women's magazines, encouraging DIY projects that blended creativity with thrift. In addition to jewellery, hair was woven into larger decorative objects, framed wreaths, elaborately embroidered textiles, and even household items like pincushions or bookmarks. These pieces adorned Victorian homes, transforming hair from a private material into a public display. Interestingly, the trade in human hair for these purposes was a commercial enterprise in its own right. Hair merchants collected, sorted, and sold hair of various lengths and colours to artisans and consumers. This industry raised questions about consent and the origins of some hair, with rumours circulating about less scrupulous sources. Historians still debate the ethical dimensions of the hair trade, exploring the intersections of class, labour, and commerce. Hair, as a bodily material, embodies complex ideas about ownership and identity. The emotional weight of hairwork also inspired superstitions and rituals. Some believed that wearing a loved one's hair close to the skin protected against evil spirits or bad luck. Others treated these items with great care, fearing damage or loss would sever spiritual connections. This belief in hair's protective and connective power resonates with Victorian spirituality, which often blended Christian doctrine with folk practices and emerging occult interests. Despite the eventual decline of hairwork's popularity by the early 20th century, its legacy endures. Museums and private collections preserve exquisite examples, allowing modern audiences to glimpse this unique facet of Victorian life. Today, hair jewellery fascinates as a symbol of intimate memory, a tangible link between the living and the dead. It challenges modern notions of privacy and sentimentality, inviting reflection on how we commemorate those we love. As night settles and memories entwine, the strands of hair woven into delicate patterns whisper stories of affection, loss, and the enduring human desire to hold on. Among the many practices surrounding Victorian hair, the use of hairpieces and false hair is perhaps one of the most fascinating and revealing. While today wigs and extensions are commonly accepted fashion tools, in the 19th century these additions were laden with social meaning, necessity, and sometimes secrecy. The reliance on false hair reflects the era's complex relationship with natural beauty, status, and appearance. Hairpieces, often called rats or switches, were commonly employed to add volume, length, or decorative detail to a woman's natural hair. These pieces were crafted from real human hair, frequently sourced from hair receivers, where shed strands were collected, cleaned, and woven into usable shapes. The scarcity of long, thick hair for elaborate styling made hairpieces a practical solution for many women, especially those with fine or thinning hair. Victorian hairstyles, with their emphasis on volume, braids, and curls, demanded an impressive amount of hair. The towering buns and intricate loops seen in portraits often included hidden rats to achieve the desired fullness. Without these enhancements, achieving the era's fashionable looks would have been nearly impossible for most women. Using hairpieces required skillful blending to avoid detection. The colour, texture, and shine had to match natural hair closely. Maids and hairdressers mastered the art of weaving rats seamlessly into the existing coiffure, hiding edges beneath curls or braids. Some women took pride in their hairpieces, investing in expensive, high-quality hair from continental Europe, prized for its fine texture and colour. Others relied on less costly, coarser hair, which could sometimes betray its artificiality. Despite their ubiquity, hairpieces carried a certain social stigma. While elaborate hairstyles signalled elegance, admitting to the use of false hair was less socially acceptable, associated with vanity or deceit. Women maintained discretion, and the skill of hiding rats became a mark of professionalism. Historical anecdotes reveal occasional mishaps, such as hairpieces slipping during social events, leading to embarrassment and whispered gossip. Satirical cartoons and plays of the time lampoon these situations, poking fun at the artifice behind beauty. Wigs also played a significant role, though often in more specialised contexts. While wigs had fallen out of fashion as everyday wear by the Victorian era, they remained essential for theatrical performances, medical needs, and some social occasions. Wigs allowed for dramatic transformations, enabling actresses or women with hair loss to assume desired identities. Medical hairpieces used by those suffering from alopecia or illness were custom-made to restore a semblance of normalcy and confidence. These pieces, often made with painstaking attention to detail, served not only aesthetic but psychological functions. The Victorian obsession with hair volume and style also gave rise to the development of hair rats in various shapes, donut-shaped pads, twisted coils or braided loops, around which natural hair could be arranged. These accessories simplified the creation of elaborate coiffures and reduced the time required. The use of false hair was not limited to women. Men occasionally used toupees or hairpieces to cover thinning or balding areas, though this was less common and often more discreet. Hairpiece use intersects with the era's emerging consumer culture. The growth of specialised shops, catalogue sales, and mail-order services expanded access to hairpieces beyond the aristocracy, democratising beauty aids but also commodifying self-presentation. Some manufacturers aggressively advertised their products, promising transformations that would restore youth, beauty, and social advantage. These ads often played on insecurities about ageing or appearance, reflecting Victorian anxieties. The maintenance of hairpieces required care. They had to be cleaned, styled, and occasionally reattached. Women learned to care for their rats with special brushes and treatments, paralleling the routines for natural hair. Yet the artificiality of false hair was a source of debate and ambivalence. Some Victorian moralists and commentators argued that reliance on such tricks undermined true beauty and virtue. Others embraced the possibilities hairpieces offered for self-expression and empowerment. The tension between authenticity and artifice in Victorian hair culture mirrors larger societal questions about identity, performance, and truth. Hairpieces also played a role in rituals of mourning and memory. Hair wreaths and jewellery sometimes incorporated false hair to replace or augment natural strands lost to illness or time, preserving the appearance of wholeness. Modern historians continue to explore the significance of false hair, questioning assumptions about deception and revealing the agency women exercise through these practices. Using hairpieces was not always about hiding flaws, but sometimes about crafting an ideal self in a restrictive social world. In the end, Victorian hairpieces remind us that beauty is often a collaborative effort between nature and artifice, private skill and public display. As the day ends and coiffures are loosened, rats removed and hair brushed free, the boundary between the natural and the constructed blurs. The hair, whether real or false, remains a testament to human creativity, resilience and desire. The notion of beauty, as embodied in Victorian hair, was inseparable from the era's prevailing ideals of femininity, health and morality. Behind the outward appearances and fashionable coiffures lay a matrix of social expectations, scientific theories and cultural anxieties that shaped how women, and those around them, conceived of hair's significance. Hair was more than decoration. It was a symbol, a moral barometer, and a marker of a woman's place in society. One widely held belief in Victorian England was that a woman's hair reflected her overall health and character. Thick, glossy hair suggested vitality and virtue, while thin, brittle strands could imply weakness, poor moral standing, or illness. This association elevated hair care from mere grooming to an almost spiritual duty. Medical treatises and beauty manuals of the time emphasized the importance of hair as a sign of reproductive health and feminine energy. Doctors recommended diets rich in iron and vitamins to promote healthy hair, linking physical well-being with social desirability. Hair loss or dullness was often pathologized, leading women to seek remedies, some effective, others harmful, to restore their locks. These beliefs intersected with Victorian concepts of morality. Hair, especially when visible or loosely arranged, could signal modesty or immodesty. Married or respectable women were expected to wear their hair in neat, controlled styles, while loose hair was often reserved for private settings or associated with sensuality. Religious teachings reinforced these ideas. Sermons and etiquette guides advised women to cover their hair in church or public as a sign of humility and respect. The hair, in these contexts, was a site where spiritual and social codes intersected. This moral framework extended to children and young girls, whose hair was carefully managed to reflect innocence and obedience. The transition from childlike loose hair to adult coiffure marked a rite of passage, embedding hair practices in broader narratives of growing up and socialization. In the realm of fashion, these values influenced hairstyle trends, updos and pinned styles, which concealed much of the hair's length, aligned with ideals of restraint and decorum. Conversely, styles that revealed or emphasized hair length sometimes sparked controversy, seen as flirtatious or rebellious. The tension between control and freedom played out not only in style, but also in scientific discourse. Emerging fields like phrenology and physiognomy posited connections between hair patterns and personality traits or moral tendencies. While now discredited, these ideas shaped contemporary views on hair's social meaning. Victorian women's magazines often blended beauty advice with moral instruction, warning against excessive vanity and encouraging naturalness tempered by discipline. Readers were advised to avoid artificial enhancements that might deceive others or themselves. Despite this, the allure of beauty and the social advantages it conferred often led women to challenge or reinterpret these strictures. The use of dyes, hairpieces and perfumes, while sometimes frowned upon, allowed for personal expression and social mobility. Hair's role as a moral symbol was complicated by class distinctions. Upper-class women had access to salons, skilled hairdressers, and luxury products, enabling them to conform more easily to ideals. Working-class women faced different challenges, balancing practical needs with societal expectations. In some cases, deviations from hair norms served as subtle forms of resistance or identity assertion. For example, the New Woman movement of the late Victorian era embraced looser hairstyles and simpler dress as statements of independence and modernity. These choices unsettled traditional gender roles and sparked public debate. The public's fascination with hair also fueled a booming beauty industry, which capitalized on women's desires to achieve moral and physical ideals. Advertisements for hair tonics, powders, and brushes promised transformation, often blending scientific rhetoric with emotional appeal. Yet these commercial endeavours were double-edged. While offering opportunities for self-care and empowerment, they also perpetuated insecurities and consumerism, tying self-worth to appearance. Medical professionals sometimes warned against overuse of products, cautioning that harmful chemicals could damage hair and health. These warnings created a cultural tension between naturalness and artifice, health and beauty. Religious and social reform movements occasionally targeted hair fashions, associating elaborate styles with frivolity or moral decay. Campaigns promoting simplicity and modesty urged women to let their hair down, only in private or symbolic contexts. Hair's connection to sexuality and desire further complicated its social significance. Sensual depictions of women's hair in art and literature often contrasted with rigid public codes. The hair became a battleground for competing visions of femininity, pure and controlled versus passionate and free. Scholars continue to debate how Victorian women navigated these conflicting messages. Some view hair practices as sites of conformity. Others see them as expressions of agency and negotiation. The cultural weight placed on hair also had psychological effects. Women internalised expectations, experiencing pressure to maintain appearances despite physical or emotional challenges. Hair loss or changes could provoke distress, impacting self-esteem. At the same time, hair rituals provided moments of care and identity affirmation. Brushing, styling, and adorning hair became acts of self-love and social connection. In sum, Victorian hair was a complex symbol entwined with ideals of health, morality, and identity. It reflected broader societal values and anxieties, serving as both a tool of control and a canvas for expression. As the quiet hours deepen, the weight of these meanings lingers in the soft rustle of hairpins and the gentle brush of strands against skin, a reminder that even the smallest details hold stories of a culture long past, yet still resonant. The materials and tools Victorians used to style their hair reveal as much about their values and daily lives as the hairstyles themselves. Brushes, combs, pins, oils, powders, and various implements were essential to the intricate rituals of hair care and styling, each item carefully crafted and chosen for its function and symbolism. Examining these tools offers a glimpse into the intersection of technology, fashion, and social identity in the Victorian period. Hairbrushes were among the most indispensable items in any woman's collection. Made primarily from wood, bone, or ivory, and often featuring handles carved with elaborate designs, brushes were not only practical but also objects of beauty and status. Some were inlaid with mother-of-pearl or decorated with painted scenes, reflecting the Victorian love for ornamentation. The quality and craftsmanship of a brush often indicated the owner's social standing, as did the rarity of the materials used. The bristles, typically boar hair, were prized for their ability to smooth the hair without causing damage. Women were advised to brush their hair frequently, not just for cleanliness but also because brushing was thought to stimulate the scalp and promote growth. Indeed, Victorian beauty manuals emphasised the importance of regular brushing as part of a holistic regimen combining diet, exercise and grooming. Combs played a multifaceted role. Made from tortoiseshell, horn, ivory or cheaper materials like bone and plastic substitutes, combs were used both to detangle hair and to secure styles in place. The fine teeth combs were ideal for smoothing hair, while wide-toothed ones assisted with managing curls or thick hair. Highly decorated combs often served as ornamental accessories, especially when placed at strategic points in the hairstyle. Some featured intricate carvings or embedded jewels, transforming functional objects into symbols of refinement and elegance. Hairpins were perhaps the most ubiquitous styling tool, yet also one of the most understated. Thin metal pins, often made of brass or steel, held curls, buns and braids firmly. Some pins had decorative heads, pearls, enamel or small gemstones, allowing women to add subtle sparkle or colour. The sheer number of pins used in a single style could be astonishing. It was not uncommon for a woman to have 50 or more pins securing her coiffure, a practice that required careful placement to avoid discomfort or injury. Stories from the period sometimes mention hairpins accidentally causing scratches or even getting lost in the thick tresses. Various oils and hair tonics were also central to Victorian hair care. Mixtures containing ingredients like rosemary, bay rum, or even crocodile oil were believed to nourish the scalp, strengthen hair strands, and impart a pleasant fragrance. Recipes for homemade tonics circulated widely, blending herbal lore with emerging scientific knowledge. Some products promised miraculous results, restoring lost hair, curing dandruff, or adding shine. However, not all were beneficial. Some contained harmful substances like lead or mercury, reflecting the era's limited understanding of chemistry and health. Hair powder was a particularly interesting tool, used to add volume, texture, and a matte finish. Powdering was especially popular among older women or those aiming for a more formal look. Made from starch or finely ground rice, powder was applied with puffs or brushes, and sometimes scented with lavender or rose. Though seemingly innocuous, the use of powder sparked health concerns. Some believed inhaling powder caused respiratory issues, and excessive use could dry out hair. Moreover, powdering was associated with the aristocracy and the theatre, sometimes considered outdated or overly artificial by younger generations. Victorian women also employed heated tools such as curling irons and crimping tongs to achieve fashionable textures. These implements required skill and caution. Heated irons were heated over open flames or stoves, posing fire hazards and risks of burns. Hairdressers specialised in these techniques, offering services that balanced artistry and safety. The rise of salons in urban centres reflected changing attitudes toward hair care. Salons offered access to the latest tools and products, as well as expert stylists who could create complex styles. Visiting a salon was both a practical necessity and a social experience, allowing women to display status and participate in emerging consumer culture. Meanwhile, in rural or working-class settings, women relied on simpler tools and homemade remedies, adapting practices to available resources. The democratisation of hair care tools over the Victorian era paralleled broader social shifts, including urbanisation and the growth of the middle class. The craftsmanship of hair tools also mirrored Victorian design trends, such as Gothic revival, arts and crafts, and later Art Nouveau influences. Objects were not merely utilitarian but also works of art, merging function with aesthetic pleasure. Collectors today prize Victorian hairbrushes, combs and pins as artefacts that embody the era's elegance and complexity. These tools, once intimate companions in daily rituals, now serve as tangible links to lives shaped by beauty and social order. Historians debate how the availability and variety of hair tools affected women's agency. Some argue that access to quality implements empowered women to control their appearance actively, while others emphasise the pressures to conform that these tools facilitated. The sensory experience of hair care, the feel of a brush through strands, the scent of oils and powders, the faint clicking of pins, created moments of mindfulness and identity formation. These rituals connected women to themselves and their communities in subtle yet profound ways. As evening deepens and the last brushstroke smooths a style into place, these tools rest quietly, ready to be summoned again for the delicate dance of beauty and self-expression. The humble brush and pin, the fragrant oil and shining comb, together weave a story of Victorian life, where technology, art, and desire entwine as intricately as the hair they shape. Victorian hair and fashion were inseparable companions, each shaping and reflecting the other in a delicate dance of cultural expression. The towering hairstyles and intricate dresses were parts of a large performance, where appearance communicated not only beauty but social order, wealth, and identity. Understanding how hair complemented clothing and vice versa reveals the intricate choreography of Victorian self-presentation. In the early Victorian period, fashion favoured narrow silhouettes, modest necklines, and long sleeves, creating an aura of restraint and elegance. Hairstyles echoed these values, often pinned tightly and styled close to the head, reinforcing a composed, controlled image. As the century progressed, dresses expanded in volume with crinolines and bustles, and hair responded with increasing complexity and height. The juxtaposition of massive skirts and high coiffures created a striking silhouette, elongating the figure and emphasising verticality. Women's heads seemed to float atop enormous bell-shaped skirts, making hair an architectural feature of fashion. This interplay accentuated status, as managing such elaborate ensembles required resources, servants, and time. Dress and hair also collaborated in framing the face and neck, areas often exposed and focal points of beauty. High collars, lace trims, and ruffles worked with carefully arranged curls or ringlets to create an overall harmony. The precise arrangement of hair strands and fabric folds was a visual symphony of texture and form. Accessories such as hats, bonnets, and veils further enriched this ensemble. Bonnets, sometimes adorned with ribbons, flowers, and feathers, were often designed to accommodate or showcase hairstyles. The size and shape of headwear could signal social rank or occasion. Some hats perched lightly atop piled hair, while others nestled against intricate braids. As fashion evolved, hairstyles adapted to new dress trends. The decline of crinolines and the rise of the bustle in the 1870s shifted emphasis toward the back of the body, encouraging hair to be styled with backward sweeps, loose loops, or cascading curls. These styles balanced the voluminous skirts behind with neat framing in front. The colour palette of clothing also influenced hair choices. Dark dresses paired well with lighter hair accessories or golden curls, while brighter dresses often matched with ribbons and flowers woven into hair. Colour coordination became a subtle form of communication, demonstrating taste and attentiveness. Hairstyles sometimes incorporated materials from dresses. Ribbons cut from gowns might be braided into hair, linking fabric and follicles in a tactile unity. This blending of textiles and hair blurred boundaries between body and attire. The constraints of fashion sometimes posed challenges. Corsets, tight sleeves, and heavy skirts limited movement, while elaborate hairstyles could strain neck muscles or obscure vision. Managing such attire demanded endurance and skill, especially for young or petite women. Social events demanded variations in the hair and dress partnership. Formal balls called for the most elaborate dresses and coiffures, while afternoon teas or informal visits allowed for simpler, softer styles. Women maintained wardrobes and hairstyles for different occasions, underscoring fashion's role as a language of propriety. The emergence of the new woman at the century's close challenged these conventions. Advocating for practical dress and freer hairstyles, the new woman rejected restrictive corsets and towering hair, embracing shorter cuts and looser arrangements. This shift signalled broader social changes, including women's increased educational and professional opportunities. Fashion magazines and pattern books documented these transitions, providing detailed illustrations and advice on harmonising hair and dress. These publications democratised fashion knowledge, allowing women across classes to participate in evolving trends. Mass production also influenced clothing and accessory availability, making stylish garments and hair ornaments accessible beyond the elite. The growth of department stores and mail-order catalogues expanded consumer choice, weaving fashion into everyday life. Despite these advances, fashion remained a powerful tool for social distinction. Women's hair and dress styles reinforced class boundaries, marking insiders and outsiders. For instance, the use of luxurious fabrics, expensive jewellery and complex hairstyles signalled wealth, while simpler styles suggested modest means. The symbolic power of hair and dress also played into marriage prospects. Suitors assessed not only a woman's appearance, but how she presented herself through clothing and hair. The coordination of these elements demonstrated conformity to social expectations and personal refinement. Behind the scenes, maintaining the perfect harmony of hair and fashion was labour-intensive. Maids, hairdressers, and seamstresses worked in concert to prepare women for the public eye. The coordination of hair accessories with dress trims required careful planning and attention. The physicality of these ensembles meant women often had to move carefully and adopt particular postures, reinforcing the social performance. The sway of skirts and the bounce of curls choreographed an unspoken etiquette of movement and presence. The sensory experience of Victorian fashion extended to textures, scents, and sounds. Silks rustled, laces tickled skin, and hairpins clicked softly amid whispered conversation. These details enriched the social atmosphere, creating immersive environments where identity was crafted through appearance. Today, surviving garments and portraits offer windows into this world, capturing the interplay of hair and dress in vibrant detail. Museums and historians study these artifacts to understand not only aesthetics, but the social dynamics they encoded. Hair and fashion, entwined as threads of the same fabric, continue to captivate us as symbols of a bygone era's beauty and complexity. Their story is one of artistry, identity, and the enduring human desire to present ourselves to the world with grace and meaning. As night draws on and the last layers are shed, the memory of silken strands lingers, a whisper of Victorian elegance woven into time. Victorian women's hair was often a silent witness to the most intimate and life-altering moments of their lives: pregnancy, childbirth, illness, and aging. These stages brought profound changes not only to the body, but also to how women managed and perceived their hair. Understanding these private intersections reveals the emotional depth and cultural meanings layered into Victorian hair culture. Pregnancy, a time of both joy and vulnerability, was accompanied by shifting attitudes toward hair. Some women reported changes in hair texture, thickness, or growth rate, attributed to hormonal fluctuations, a fact Victorian medical practitioners began to acknowledge, albeit imperfectly. More significantly, hair became a canvas for expressing the dual identities of mother and woman. While societal expectations demanded continued modesty and decorum, pregnancy also allowed some relaxation of strict appearance codes, particularly in private or domestic settings. Photographs and paintings of pregnant women are rare, but when present they often depict softer hairstyles, less rigid than public-facing coiffures. Loose curls or simpler braids suggested comfort and nurturing, aligning with the idealised maternal role. Childbirth marked a profound physical and emotional transition, often accompanied by periods of recovery and convalescence. During these times, women sometimes abandoned elaborate hairstyles in favour of practicality, letting hair down or wearing it in simple buns to accommodate comfort and hygiene. The process of hair care could become a form of therapy and solace during recovery. Gentle brushing and styling rituals offered moments of self-care amid the demands of motherhood and illness. Postpartum hair loss, sometimes called telogen effluvium today, was common and troubling for Victorian women. The shedding of hair in large amounts after childbirth could cause distress, as hair was tightly linked to beauty and health. Remedies ranged from nourishing oils to herbal tonics, though effectiveness varied. Hair loss could also affect self-esteem and social interactions, especially in a culture that prized youthful appearance. Women often sought ways to conceal thinning areas, employing hairpieces or adjusting styles. Illness brought further challenges. Diseases like tuberculosis, which plagued Victorian society, often caused fatigue and physical decline, reflected visibly in a woman's hair. Dullness, brittleness and loss signalled poor health, sometimes stigmatising the sufferer. Hospitalisation or long-term care frequently meant a departure from fashionable hair practices. Women might cut their hair short or forgo styling altogether during illness, reflecting both necessity and altered identity. Ageing introduced another complex relationship with hair. As women matured, their hair changed in colour and texture. Greying was inevitable, yet attitudes toward grey hair varied. Some Victorian women embraced their silver strands as signs of wisdom and dignity, while others sought to conceal them with dyes or powders. The tension between natural ageing and cultural expectations of youthfulness mirrored broader societal ambivalence. Widows, who often entered prolonged periods of mourning, adapted their hair practices accordingly. Black crepe veils, subdued styles, and minimal adornments signalled grief and respect. Hair was usually worn plainly, avoiding ostentation. The period of mourning itself was highly ritualised, with strict codes governing attire and behaviour. Hair, as a visible marker, played a role in communicating loss and social status. The transition out of mourning involved gradual reintroduction of colour, ornamentation and style, reflecting recovery and reintegration. Throughout these life stages, hair served as a visual diary of experience, marking transitions and embodying emotion. The act of styling or letting hair down became a form of storytelling, revealing internal states to the outer world. Women's diaries and letters sometimes mention hair in contexts of hope, despair, and resilience, underscoring its personal significance. The physical labour involved in managing hair during illness or fatigue also highlights the support networks women relied upon. Family members, servants, or friends often assisted with hair care, making it a communal act. Hair's symbolic role extended to rituals of passing and memory. Locks of hair were saved for keepsakes or used in mourning jewellery, preserving a tangible link to the person beyond life's fragility. Historians continue to explore how hair intersected with gendered experiences of health and ageing, revealing the body's role as a cultural text. Victorian hair, in all its stages, was thus a mirror reflecting the cycles of life: growth, decline, loss and renewal. Its presence in daily routines and special moments underscores the depth of meaning attached to what might seem a simple strand. As night softens and shadows lengthen, the touch of hair on skin evokes memories of care, endurance, and the quiet dignity of lived experience. In these strands lie the stories of countless women, their hopes, fears, and transformations woven into time's gentle fabric. The intricate world of Victorian hair care also carried a surprising and sometimes peculiar undercurrent of superstition, folklore, and ritual. Beneath the polished surfaces of salons and parlours lay a rich tapestry of beliefs, some borrowed from older traditions, others uniquely Victorian. These cultural layers reveal how hair functioned not only as a social marker, but as a vessel of mystery and power. One widespread superstition held that hair possessed protective qualities. Many Victorians believed that wearing a lock of a loved one's hair could guard against evil spirits or bad luck. This belief linked hair to notions of personal essence or life force, an idea that transcended eras and cultures. In some households, it was customary to hang braids of hair by the hearth or above doorways, intending to safeguard the home. Such practices blurred the lines between superstition and domestic ritual, integrating hair into the fabric of daily life. Conversely, the fear that hair could be used for malevolent purposes, such as witchcraft or hexes, permeated Victorian consciousness. Tales of stolen hair used in curses circulated, underscoring the perceived power contained in a strand. Women guarded their hair carefully, aware that it might be coveted not only for beauty but for darker arts. Folkloric remedies for hair problems often reflected this duality of magic and medicine. Recipes for hair tonics might include ingredients believed to have mystical properties: rosemary to attract love, lavender to ward off evil, or vinegar to cleanse spiritual impurities. These beliefs influenced how hair was treated during illness or emotional distress. Some women refrained from cutting hair during periods of grief, fearing it would sever spiritual bonds. Others wore hair loosely or covered it to protect themselves or family members from harm. The Victorian fascination with the occult and spiritualism further infused hair with significance. Seance, spirit photography, and mediumship were popular among certain social circles, where hair might be offered as a physical connection to departed souls. Hair was sometimes used in seances as a focus object, believed to enhance communication with the spirit world. The intimate connection between hair and identity made it a potent talisman. The symbolic meaning of hair also extended to courtship rituals. Some folklore advised young women on how to use their hair to attract or repel suitors. Wearing hair down in moonlight was thought to increase desirability, while braiding hair a certain way could ward off unwanted attention. Superstitions about cutting hair on particular days or during specific phases of the moon influenced grooming schedules. For example, some believed that cutting hair during a new moon encouraged growth, while others cautioned against trimming hair on Fridays or during storms. These beliefs intertwined with emerging scientific ideas, creating a complex cultural landscape. While doctors and beauty experts advocated rational care, many women privately embraced older customs, blending tradition with modernity. The interplay between superstition and science sometimes created contradictions. For example, a hair tonic might be marketed as a medical remedy, while containing ingredients believed to possess magical properties. Advertisements cleverly appealed to both logic and emotion. Hair's role in folklore extended into literature and popular culture. Gothic novels, penny dreadfuls, and plays frequently featured hair as a symbol of mystery, power, or danger. Scenes of a heroine's hair being cut, stolen, or ensnared carried dramatic and symbolic weight. In art, flowing hair often represented freedom or wildness, while tightly bound hair suggested control or repression. These visual metaphors reinforced societal attitudes and anxieties about women's autonomy. Historians continue to debate the extent to which these superstitions influenced everyday behaviour. Some argue that they functioned as subtle forms of resistance to rigid social norms, allowing women private spaces of belief and practice. Others view them as evidence of the era's ambivalence toward modernity, where progress coexisted uneasily with older worldviews. The material culture of superstition also left tangible traces. Museums preserved charms, talismans, and hair jewellery imbued with protective meanings. These objects reveal the personal and communal importance of hair beyond mere aesthetics. Victorian hair superstitions remind us that beauty and belief are often intertwined. Hair, as a living part of the body yet capable of detachment and transformation, occupies a liminal space between the natural and supernatural. As the night deepens and quiet descends, the whispered tales of hair's magic echo faintly, an enduring reminder that even in the age of science, mystery finds a way to weave itself through the strands. In the delicate curves of a braid, the shimmer of a lock, the flicker of a pin, linger the shadows of belief, longing, and the human desire to hold power over the unseen. As Victorian society approached the close of the 19th century, the world began to shift beneath the carefully coiffed feet of its citizens. Technological advances, expanding global influences, and the changing roles of women brought subtle but powerful transformations to the realm of hair, transformations that hinted at the coming storms of modernity, suffrage, and rebellion. By the 1880s and 1890s, women's hair remained long, abundant, and elaborately styled, but the elaborate constructions of earlier decades were beginning to soften. The towering chignons and absurdly large rats of mid-century were still present, but slowly giving way to looser, more natural silhouettes. The pressure to maintain sculptural perfection was still there, yes, but new voices had begun to whisper of liberation. One of the strongest influences on late Victorian hair came not from England at all, but from Paris. French fashion magazines, artists and milliners began infiltrating British tastes. The aesthetic started to shift from rigid formality to flowing romanticism. Curls, especially around the face, gained renewed popularity, styled to look unaffected, while of course requiring hours of care and the occasional bit of hidden wire. The Gibson girl look, though technically an American invention, began to capture imaginations across the Atlantic as well. This fictional ideal of a poised, athletic, independent woman sported a voluminous pompadour, puffed loosely at the front and pulled into a soft bun or coil at the nape. This hairstyle evoked elegance without suffocation, and it became a kind of gentle rebellion against the tightly wound, matronly coils of decades past. Still, even with this loosening of form, hair remained an instrument of social messaging. Married women were expected to maintain their styles with dignity. Young women had more freedom, but even they had to balance flirtation with propriety. A loose curl over the temple? Delightful. Too many curls? Scandalous. The line between tasteful beauty and social ruin remained perilously thin. Meanwhile, working-class women, who had far less time for the daily rituals of hair management, adopted simpler adaptations of fashionable trends. The bangs that wealthier women curled carefully into fringe could be snipped straight across or simply brushed aside. Hair was still long but often braided tightly for practical reasons, especially among domestic workers and factory girls. Women who laboured outside the home had to contend with the practical hazards of long hair, getting caught in machines, for example, or becoming filthy with soot or sweat. Some adopted headscarves not only to protect the hair, but to conceal its imperfect state. Others began quietly trimming their lengths just enough to stay safe and clean, acts that, while small, marked a deviation from tradition. One often overlooked evolution of this era was the rise of the hairdresser as a professional figure. Previously, most hair care occurred at home or in informal women-run spaces, but by the end of the century, urban salons were appearing, offering not only cuts and styles, but also tonics, dyes, and even hair health consultations. These shops, sometimes fronted by ambitious women entrepreneurs, offered a curious mix of vanity, science, and community gossip. Some historians argue that these salons served as safe spaces for women to explore their identities, socially, aesthetically, even politically. A woman could sit, relax, discuss scandalous novels or suffragette meetings, and emerge with not only her hair refreshed, but her sense of self invigorated. The salon was also where the Victorian woman might quietly experiment with boundary-pushing trends. A slightly shorter fringe, a softer colour, a twist borrowed from a French actress's photograph. While conformity still ruled the day, the cracks in the facade had begun to show. And then there was the curious matter of hair dye. Yes, Victorian women dyed their hair, but not in the candy colours we might imagine today. Instead, the emphasis was on darkening greys or enriching the natural colour. Henna was commonly used to add auburn tones, while concoctions of sage, walnut, or even lead were applied to deepen browns and blacks. The danger of some of these mixtures was significant, but vanity often triumphed over caution. Blondes remained fashionable, associated with purity and youth. Women who weren't naturally fair sometimes used lemon juice and sunlight, or stranger, more caustic combinations to coax a few shades lighter. One fringe remedy involved applying a mixture of hydrogen peroxide and crushed pearl, followed by sun exposure, in hopes of achieving a celestial halo. The result was rarely as divine as promised. Despite these subtle acts of beauty rebellion, the expectations for women's hair remained deeply gendered. Men's grooming, by contrast, was allowed to be straightforward. Beards and moustaches came in and out of vogue, but rarely did they require rats, pins, or the equivalent of a hair corset. What did shift, though, was the cultural conversation about beauty itself. As photography became more common, women began to see themselves reflected with stark realism. Unlike a painted portrait, which could flatter or idealise, photography captured every stray hair, every tired curl, every smudge of coal dust. It was both democratizing and alarming. In response, the beauty industry expanded. Ads for hair oils, scalp stimulants, and miracle cures for hair loss proliferated in women's magazines. Testimonials by fictional ladies of rank described how a single potion had returned them to radiant femininity. Some of these tonics were harmless vegetable oils, others were loaded with alcohol or opiates. The line between grooming and self-medication became blurry, and still, despite all the lotions, the hats, the hairpieces, and the elaborate rituals, a quiet revolution was brewing. Some young women began asking radical questions. Why must hair always be long? Why must it be done every morning, rain or shine? Why must a woman's value be measured in her braids? Among suffragettes, the answer was increasingly, it shouldn't. Many early feminists kept to traditional hair standards in public. After all, too much rebellion at once could alienate potential supporters. But in private, some began to experiment. A cropped style here, a practical bun there, not shaving their necks or foregoing expensive oils. For every daring cut or quiet protest, there was also backlash. Critics warned that short hair would make women mannish or unlovable, that it would disturb domestic harmony, that a woman with disordered hair might as well have a disordered mind. And yet, the whisper of change had begun. Just as women were beginning to question their lack of voice, vote, and independence, so too were they quietly challenging their hair's dominion over their time, movement, and money. Historians still argue whether Victorian hairstyles were more a symbol of empowerment or oppression. On one hand, the sheer artistry and patience required to maintain them could be interpreted as a form of feminine mastery, a coded language of status and skill. On the other, the daily burden, the expense, the rigidity, these could easily be seen as tools of control. One thing is certain. By the dawn of the 20th century, the roots of transformation had been laid. As the final Victorian coiffures swept into the new century, their tightly wound curls carried echoes of an age of contradictions, of beauty and burden, of public propriety and private ritual. The rituals did not vanish overnight. Hair, after all, is slow to grow, and so is change. But the seeds were planted. One day soon, women would cut their hair into bobs, set it with finger waves, dye it platinum blonde, or shave it entirely. But in the fading candlelight of the Victorian parlour, they were still combing, pinning, and dreaming. For every woman who placed her last pin into her bun before bed, there lay the quiet knowledge that something new was coming, and perhaps, just perhaps, the next morning would require fewer pins, fewer rules, and just a bit more freedom. And now, dear listener, as we glide gently down from the towering hairpieces and softly flickering gaslights of the Victorian age, allow yourself to breathe a little deeper. Let the images fade, the rustle of satin skirts, the slow twist of a curling iron over an open flame, the hush of a salon where secrets traded places with strands of hair. You've walked through drawing rooms and parlours, stood before mirrors clouded with perfume, and touched the delicate boundary between identity and ornament. The bobby pins are resting now. The hair rats are stored away. The heavy oils have settled back into their bottles. And in the silence that follows the end of the ritual, there's peace. A quiet, vintage peace tinged with lavender, camphor, and a little bit of magic. Feel the weight of time soften on your shoulders. Let your breath slow, as if you were being gently brushed with the softest boar bristle comb. You're not in 2025 anymore. You're back in that velvet chair, eyes heavy, curls resting softly at your neck. So rest now. Let your thoughts spiral like a perfect ringlet. Sleep comes slowly, gently, lovingly, like a mother weaving hair into a braid. And tomorrow, when the light returns, perhaps your dreams will still carry a trace of pomade and moonlight.